So, this module is about capacity. Capacity is a very important, or perhaps one of the important business decisions that every organization has to make. Therefore, we have addressed this issue in some detail in this module. We started with the notion of capacity. We first tried to define capacity and make a sense of, from an operations management perspective, what do we mean by capacity? We started with that. Then we moved on and focused on the process analysis, which is the fundamental mechanism for any capacity analysis that we need to make. So, we identified the kind of information that we need to do a process flow diagram, the various activities, the resources and constraints, the process time, the number of resources, what is the demand. So, these kinds of information we gathered and developed a process flow diagram and used it as a basic unit of analysis for analyzing capacity related issues in variety of situations. Then we went on and developed those basic measures. We identified what is called a cycle time, we identified something called a throughput time, and then of course the bottleneck. So, with this basic analysis, we started with a basic understanding of what constitutes a process and how it in a way influences the capacity. So, that is the next thing that we did. Then we moved on to a very important issue of what is called estimating the output from a system, therefore identifying the bottleneck and saying how do I debottleneck, what happens when I add one more capacity, what happens when I change the process choice a little bit. So, we were exploring all these possibilities to understand how do you increase the output from a given process. Then we also introduced another interesting dimension, which is if there is a targeted output and if it is a worker paced system where it is like a final assembly or a set of people putting together leading to a particular output. So, how do you work backwards? My output requirement per day is 400. What does it mean? So, what capacity should I build? So, we addressed that problem and understood capacity from that perspective. So far we have, up to this we were discussing capacity from a deterministic process times and demand. So, we went one step further and asked the question, what insights do I have if my process is characterized by a lot of uncertainty in demand and uncertainty in process times. So, we used rudimentary ideas from queuing theory and tried to establish some useful managerial insights into this capacity problem that we have been inquiring. Finally, we wanted to understand how can one address peak hour, because it is not a good idea to build capacity for peak hour, that can be a very expensive affair. So, how do we address peak hour requirements? We looked at that problem in some detail and tried to identify 4 or 5 strategies which you can use in your work settings, by which you will be able to, instead of investing in more units of capacity, deploy the existing capacity a little bit innovatively and address the peak hour demand. So, in a nutshell, we have looked at a few perspectives related to capacity. I am very confident you will find these ideas very relevant to your work setting, you will be able to identify specific areas in your workplace where you can perform similar analysis and address the issue of capacity, because at the end of the day, addressing a capacity problem with the available resources in a least cost fashion makes business organizations more competitive. So, I think we must develop this perspective, use these tools. I am hopeful you will use these tools to address capacity problems and create that dimension of competitiveness which we can from the operations system using these ideas.